The ocean had always been Ethan's refuge, standing on the weathered wooden deck of his rented cottage. He watched the waves crash against the rocky shore below. The salt air filled his lungs, sharp and cleansing, were carrying away fragments of the grief that had followed him here like a shadow. 3 months had passed since the accident. 3 months since his world had shattered. 3 months since he'd felt anything resembling peace. The small coastal town of Morros Bay wasn't on any tourist map. That's exactly why Ethan had chosen it. No distractions, no well-meaning friends trying to fix him, no reminders of the life he'd left behind in the city. Just silence, solitude, and the endless rhythm of the sea. At 32, Ethan Hayes had once been a promising artist. His gallery showings had drawn crowds, his paintings praised for their emotional depth and vibrant use of color. But after losing his partner Marcus in a car crash, the colors had drained from his world. His brushes sat untouched, his canvases blank. The creative fire that had once defined him had been extinguished. Leaving only ashes and questions he couldn't answer, he pulled his cardigan tighter against the morning chill. November in Morros Bay was beautiful in its bleakness. Gray skies meeting gray water, the landscape stripped down to its essential elements. It matched something inside him. "Coffee first," he muttered to himself, turning back toward the cottage. "Then maybe I'll try to paint." Maybe was a lie he told himself every morning. The town's only cafe sat at the end of Main Street. A charming brick building with ivy climbing its walls and condensation fogging its windows. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls created a warmth that Ethan found almost painful in its normalcy. Life continued for everyone else. The world kept spinning. He ordered his usual black coffee, no sugar, and found a corner table by the window. His sketchbook sat before him, accusingly blank. He'd brought it every day for the past 2 weeks, hoping inspiration would strike. So far, nothing. The bell above the door chimed. Ethan glanced up instinctively and froze. The man who entered was unlike anyone else in this quiet town. Tall and lean, with dark hair that fell slightly into his eyes, he moved with a careful grace that suggested someone used to occupying as little space as possible. He wore a worn leather jacket over a navy sweater, jeans that had seen better days, and carried a leather messenger bag that looked older than both of them combined. But it was his eyes that caught Ethan Graygreen, like the ocean during a storm, holding depths of their own sadness. Their gazes met for just a moment. The stranger's eyes widened slightly, a flash of recognition that made no sense because they'd never met. Then he looked away quickly, moving to the counter to order. Ethan's heart was racing. He didn't understand why. He forced his attention back to his sketchbook. But his hand had already begun moving, sketching lines without conscious thought. The curve of a jawline, the fall of dark hair, the set of shoulders carrying invisible weight. Did this seat taken? Ethan's hand stilled. He looked up to find the stranger standing beside his table, coffee cup in hand, those storm-colored eyes meeting his with a mixture of hope and hesitation. "No," Ethan managed, his voice rougher than intended. "Please." The man sat, setting down his cup and bag with careful deliberation. Up close, Ethan could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of exhaustion beneath them. This was someone who didn't sleep well. Someone who knew what it meant to carry ghosts. "I'm Adrian," the man said, offering a slight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Adrian Winters." Ethan Hayes." They shook hands. Adrian's grip was firm but brief, as though he wasn't used to physical contact and wasn't sure how long was appropriate. "You're new in town," Adrian observed. It wasn't a question. Renting the cliffside cottage for a few months, needed a change of scenery. Ethan heard himself falling into the same vague explanation he'd given the landlord. "You live here?" "About a year now. I'm a writer." Adrian's fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup, a nervous gesture. "Or trying to be. Mostly, I stare at blank pages and pretend I'm working." Something in Ethan's chest eased. "I'm an artist, Roz. Mostly I stare at blank canvases now." Adrian's eyes sharpened with understanding. Real understanding, not pity. "Creative block." "Something like that." The silence that fell between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who understood that some things didn't need to be explained, that some wounds didn't need to be named right away. "I noticed you sketching," Adrian said after a moment, nodding toward the sketchbook. "May I?" Ethan's first instinct was to refuse. He hadn't shown anyone his work in months, but something about Adrian made him hesitate and nod. Adrian studied the sketch, his own face captured in quick, confident lines. His expression was unreadable, but his fingers trembled slightly as they hovered over the page. "You see people clearly," Adrian said softly, "even in fragments. That's a gift or a curse?" The words escaped before Ethan could stop them. Adrian looked up, meeting his eyes. "Both, maybe. The things worth having usually are." They talked for 2 hours. It should have been awkward to strangers sharing space in a small cafe, making conversation about nothing and everything. But it wasn't. Adrian spoke about his writing struggles, about moving to Morrow's Bay to finish a novel he'd been working on for 3 years. Ethan found himself sharing more than he'd intended about his art, about the galleries, about the pressure to create, and the emptiness of not being able to. He didn't mention Marcus. Neither did Adrian mention whatever ghosts had brought him here. Some stories needed time. "There's a cove," Adrian said, as they finally stood to leave, the cafe owner politely wiping down nearby tables. "About a mile north of your cottage. The locals don't go there, Mashraki. Difficult to reach. But at sunset, the light hits the water in this way that..." He trailed off, looking almost embarrassed. "I go there to write sometimes. To think. If you ever want company while staring at blank canvases, I mean..." Ethan's heart did something complicated in his chest. "I'd like that." Adrian's smile, when it came, was genuine this time. It transformed his face, chasing away some of the shadows. "Tomorrow, then? Around 4? Tomorrow." That night, Ethan stood on his deck again, but something had shifted. The ocean looked different, not less vast, not less powerful, but somehow less lonely. He thought about Adrian's eyes, about the careful way he moved through the world, about the understanding that had passed between them without words. For the first time in months, Ethan felt something other than grief. It was small, fragile, barely more than a spark, but it was there. Hope inside the cottage. His sketchbook lay open on the kitchen table. The drawing of Adrian stared up at the ceiling, rendered in confident strokes that Ethan hadn't known he still possessed. Below it, he'd written 2 words without thinking. "Not alone." Adrian walked through the darkened streets of Morrow's Bay, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, his mind replaying every moment of the conversation. He'd gone to the cafe for coffee, for routine, for something to break up the monotony of another unproductive writing day. He hadn't expected Ethan, hadn't expected those hazel eyes that seemed to see through every carefully constructed wall, hadn't expected the way his heart had stuttered when their hands touched, hadn't expected to feel anything at all after Daniel. After everything that had happened, Adrian had convinced himself he was better off alone, that getting close to someone again would only lead to more pain, more disappointment, more proof that he was fundamentally unworthy of love. But there had been something in Ethan's expression, a reflection of his own loneliness, his own struggle. A recognition tomorrow, he thought, climbing the stairs to his small apartment above the bookstore. Tomorrow, I'll see him again. The half-finished manuscript on his desk caught his eye as he passed. 3 years of work, hundreds of pages about a man learning to love again after loss. Adrian had been stuck on the ending for months, unable to write his protagonist toward happiness. When he couldn't imagine it for himself, he sat down, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then, for the first time in weeks, he began to type. Sometimes healing begins not with grand gestures or dramatic revelations, but with a simple conversation, with one person seeing another clearly and choosing to stay. Anyway, Ethan dreamed that night, not the nightmares that usually plagued him, images of twisted metal and hospital rooms and Marcus's empty studio. Instead, he dreamed of gray-green eyes and a voice that understood silence. He dreamed of waves and light and the feeling of standing at the edge of something new and terrifying. He woke with the sun, Feeling lighter than he had in months, his phone showed 6:47 a.m. 10 hours until he'd see Adrian again. It felt like both too long and not enough time. Ethan made coffee, carried it out to the deck, and watched the sunrise paint the ocean in shades of amber and rose colors. He was seeing colors again, really seeing them, not just going through the motions of observation. Inside, his easel stood in the corner where he'd abandoned it weeks ago. Dust covered the palette, the brushes stiff with dried paint. It would take time to clean them, to prepare, to begin again. But maybe, just maybe, he was ready. He thought of Adrian's words. The things worth having are both gift and curse. Perhaps loneliness was like that too. Perhaps it had brought him here, to this moment, to this place where two broken people could find each other. Perhaps some endings were just beginnings in disguise. Ethan carried his coffee inside, set it on the table beside his sketchbook, and began to clean his brushes. Outside, the ocean continued its eternal rhythm, constant and patient. Waiting for the tide to turn, the cove was everything Adrian had promised and more. Ethan stood at the edge of the cliff path, looking down at the small crescent of beach nestled between towering rock formations. The tide was going out, leaving tidal pools that reflected the amber afternoon sky. Driftwood lay scattered like sculptures, bleached white by sun and salt. And there, sitting on a large flat rock near the water's edge, was Adrian. He hadn't noticed Ethan's arrival yet. He sat with his notebook open on his lap, pen in hand, but his gaze was fixed on the horizon. The wind ruffled his dark hair, and in profile, he looked like something from a painting himself, solitary and beautiful and sad. Ethan's breath caught. His fingers itched for his sketchbook. "Are you going to stand up there all evening, or are you coming down?" Adrian's voice carried up on the wind, teasing and warm. He'd turned, was looking up at Ethan with that almost smile playing at his lips. Admiring the view, Ethan called back, making his way carefully down the rocky path. "You didn't mention it was a treacherous descent. Keeps out the tourists." Adrian closed his notebook as Ethan approached. "Besides, the best things usually require a bit of risk." Ethan settled onto the rock beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. The stone was cold through his jeans, but the proximity to Adrian generated its own warmth. "Did you write?" Ethan asked, nodding at the notebook. "A little more than usual, actually." Adrian's fingers traced the worn cover. "Sometimes being near the water helps. The sound of it, the rhythm. It's like it unlocks something." "I know what you mean. I did some painting this morning. Nothing good, but it's more than I've managed in months." Adrian turned to him, those storm-colored eyes searching his face. What changed? The question hung between them, weighted with meaning. Ethan could deflect, could change the subject, could maintain the careful distance he'd kept with everyone since Marcus's death, but he didn't want to. Not with Adrian. "I met someone," Ethan said quietly. "Someone who reminded me that feeling something, anything, is better than numbness." Adrian's expression shifted, softened. "The numbness is safer, though. Feeling means hurting. You sound like you know from experience, don't we all?" Adrian looked back at the ocean. "I came here to escape my own mess. Thought isolation would help me finish my book, would give me perspective. Instead, I just brought all my baggage with me and unpacked it in a different location." Ethan waited, letting the silence stretch. His therapist had taught him that sometimes the best thing you could offer someone was the space to speak in their own time. "I was in a relationship for 5 years, Adrian finally said. "Daniel, we lived in Seattle, had this beautiful apartment overlooking the Sound. I thought we were happy. Turned out I was the only one who thought that." He laughed, bitter and sharp. He'd been cheating for 2 years. 2 years. And I had no idea. Everyone else knew, our friends, our neighbors. They pitied me. The clueless writer, so lost in his own head he couldn't see what was right in front of him. "That's not your fault," Ethan said firmly. "His choices aren't a reflection of your worth." "Aren't they, though?" Adrian's voice was raw now, stripped of its usual careful control. "What does it say about me that I wasn't enough to keep him faithful?" That I was so easy to deceive? Ethan recognized the spiral, the self-blame that came with loss. He'd been there himself, asking why he hadn't been in the car with Marcus that day. Why he hadn't said I love you one more time. Why he hadn't been enough to make Marcus stay alive somehow. As if love could cheat death. It says he was a coward who didn't deserve you, Ethan said. It says he made selfish choices and blamed you for his own emptiness. It doesn't say anything about your worth except that you loved deeply and trusted completely. And those are beautiful things, Adrian. Even when they hurt. Adrian's eyes were bright with unshed tears. How do you do that? How do you make it sound like I'm not completely broken? Because you're not. You're hurting. There's a difference. The sun was sinking lower now, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The waves caught the light, turning golden. It was the kind of moment Ethan would have photographed before, would have tried to capture on canvas. Now he just wanted to exist in it, to feel it fully. I lost someone too, Ethan heard himself say. My partner, Marcus. Car accident. 8 months ago. Some drunk driver ran a red light and... He couldn't finish the sentence. He never could. Adrian's hand found his fingers interlacing without hesitation. The touch was electric, grounding, terrifying. I'm so sorry, Adrian whispered. Everyone is. Sorry doesn't bring him back. Ethan stared at their joined hands. We were together for 7 years. He was a musician, jazz saxophone. God, he could make that instrument sing. He had this way of finding beauty in everything, making even ordinary moments feel magical. I thought we'd grow old together. I thought. His voice cracked. I thought I'd have more time. You loved him very much. I did. I do. I don't know what tense to use anymore. He's gone, but the love isn't. It just has nowhere to go now. They sat in silence as the sun touched the horizon. Their hands still clasped, two damaged people holding on to each other at the edge of the world. I don't know how to do this, Adrian said eventually. How to feel things again. How to trust. How to believe that opening myself up won't just lead to more pain. I don't know either, Ethan admitted. I came here to hide. To disappear into my grief until it either killed me or I figured out how to live with it. And now? Now I'm terrified because I felt something yesterday when I met you. Something other than pain. And that feels like a betrayal somehow. Like I'm leaving Marcus behind. Adrian squeezed his hand. Or maybe it means you're finally ready to honor him by living again. By choosing life even when it's scary. Ethan turned to look at Adrian fully. In the fading light, he was heartbreakingly beautiful, vulnerable, and honest and real. Is that what you're doing? Choosing life? I'm trying. Some days are harder than others. Adrian managed a small smile. Today's a bit easier, though. You help with that? The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Ethan knew he should probably be careful, should guard his heart more, should remember all the reasons why getting close to someone new was a terrible idea. But he'd spent 8 months being careful. 8 months protecting himself from feeling anything. And look where it had gotten him alone, numb, going through the motions of existence without really living. I'd like to see you again, Ethan said, his heart pounding. Not just tomorrow, regularly. I'd like to get to know you, Adrian Winters. The real you, not just the parts you show to strangers. Adrian's breath hitched. That's a dangerous offer. The real me is messy and complicated and comes with a lot of baggage. So do I. Maybe we can help each other carry it. For a long moment, Adrian just looked at him. Then, slowly, he leaned forward and rested his forehead against Ethan's. The gesture was intimate without being sexual. A moment of pure connection that made Ethan's chest ache with its tenderness. Okay, Adrian whispered. Okay, yes. Let's be messy and complicated together. They stayed like that as darkness fell, foreheads touching, hands clasped, listening to the rhythm of the waves. Neither spoke, but both felt it, the shift, the opening, the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, they'd found someone who understood. Over the following days, they fell into a pattern. Mornings, Ethan would paint in his cottage, the ocean visible through his window. The canvases were still rough, unfinished, but color was returning to his work. blues and grays, mostly studies of water and sky, of the way light moved across surfaces. Adrian wrote in his apartment above the bookstore, his protagonist finally moving toward the ending he'd been unable to write. The words came easier now, flowing with a confidence he'd lost somewhere between Daniel's betrayal and his flight to Morrow's Bay. Afternoons, they met. Sometimes at the cafe, sharing coffee and conversation. Sometimes at the cove, sitting in comfortable silence while they worked. Sometimes they walked the beach, collecting sea glass and driftwood. Sharing pieces of their histories and fragments, Ethan learned that Adrian had a younger sister he adored, that his favorite author was Patricia Highsmith, that he could quote entire passages of poetry from memory, that he took his coffee with too much sugar and hated seafood despite living by the ocean. Adrian discovered that Ethan had studied art in Paris, that he'd once backpacked through Southeast Asia, that he laughed at terrible puns and collected vintage postcards, that he was left-handed and had a scar on his right knee from a childhood bike accident. They learned each other slowly, carefully, like archaeologists excavating something precious and fragile. But there was something else building between them too, a tension that manifested in lingering glances, in the careful way they avoided touching too much, in the electricity that sparked when their hands accidentally brushed. One evening, walking back from the cove, Adrian suddenly stopped. "What?" Ethan asked, turning back. "I need to tell you something." Adrian's face was pale in the twilight. "I need you to know that I'm not good at this. At relationships. Daniel said I was too distant, too in my own head. He said loving me was like trying to hug a ghost eye. It was never really there, even when I was physically present. That sounds like his excuse, not your failing. Maybe. But what if he was right?" Adrian's voice broke. "What if I'm not capable of giving someone what they need? What if I'm too damaged?" Ethan closed the distance between them, cupping Adrian's face gently in his hands. "Listen to me. You are not too damaged. You are not too distant. You are someone who's been hurt and is trying to heal, just like me. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you human." "Ethan, I'm scared too," Ethan continued. "I'm terrified that opening my heart again means I'll lose again. That I'll invest everything in someone, and then they'll be gone, and I'll have to survive that pain all over. But I'm more scared of not trying, of letting fear keep me from something that could be beautiful. What if we hurt each other? Then we hurt each other, and we deal with it. Together." Ethan's thumb traced Adrian's cheekbone. "I'm not asking for promises or guarantees. I'm just asking for honesty. For you to show up as you are, messy and complicated and all. Can you do that?" Adrian closed his eyes, leaning into Ethan's touch. When he opened them again, they were clearer, more certain, as he said, "Yes, I can try." The kiss was inevitable, had been building since that first moment in the cafe. Ethan leaned in slowly, giving Adrian time to pull away. But Adrian didn't pull away. He closed the distance between them, pressing his lips to Ethan's with a gentleness that made Ethan's heart stutter. It was soft, tentative, a question more than a declaration. Their lips moved together carefully, learning each other's rhythm. Adrian's hand came up to rest on Ethan's chest, over his heart. And Ethan wondered if he could feel how fast it was beating. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "Okay," Adrian said, a genuine smile breaking across his face. "Okay, that was..."
Yeah.
Ethan agreed, unable to stop grinning. It really was. They stood there on the darkening beach, holding each other, and for the first time in months, both felt something like hope take root in the ruins of their hearts. They were still careful with each other, still navigating the uncertain territory between friendship and something more, but now there was an acknowledgement, an understanding that what was growing between them was real and worth protecting. Ethan found himself thinking about Adrian constantly, the way he bit his lower lip when concentrating, the soft sound of his laugh when genuinely amused, the vulnerable look in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. These small details infiltrated Ethan's art. His paintings began featuring a figure in the distance, never fully formed, but always present, always watching the horizon. Adrian's writing transformed too. His protagonist, who had been stuck in limbo for hundreds of pages, suddenly found forward momentum. Love scenes appeared that Adrian had never been able to write before, not explicit, but emotionally raw, capturing the terror and exhilaration of opening yourself to another person. They spent more time together. Adrian would come to Ethan's cottage in the evenings, and they'd cook dinner together, simple meals that always took longer than necessary because they kept stopping to talk, to kiss, to simply exist in each other's presence. "Tell me about him," Adrian said one night as they sat on the floor of Ethan's living room, the fireplace casting dancing shadows on the walls. "About Marcus." Ethan had been expecting the question, but it still made his throat tighten. "Are you sure you want to hear about him? He's part of your story. I want to know all of you, even the parts that hurt." So Ethan talked. He told Adrian about meeting Marcus at a gallery opening, about their first date at a tiny jazz club in Brooklyn, about the way Marcus would practice his saxophone at odd hours and never apologize for it. He talked about their fights and their reconciliations, about the ordinary beauty of 7 years together. "He sounds wonderful," Adrian said softly when Ethan finished. He was. He was also stubborn and messy and sometimes thoughtless about time. He'd promised to meet me somewhere and show up an hour late because he'd gotten caught up in a melody. It drove me crazy. Ethan smiled through tears. "I miss being driven crazy by him." Adrian reached out, wiping a tear from Ethan's cheek. "You're allowed to still love him, you know? Loving him doesn't mean you can't love someone else. Is that what we're doing? Loving each other?" The question hung in the air. Adrian's hand stilled against Ethan's face. "I don't know," Adrian admitted. "I know I think about you constantly. I know I feel lighter when I'm with you. I know the thought of you leaving when your lease ends makes me physically ill. Is that love? Or is it just two lonely people clinging to each other?" Ethan turned his head, pressing a kiss to Adrian's palm. "Does it have to be one or the other? Can't it be both?" "I want it to be more," Adrian confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want to be brave enough to call this what it is. But I'm scared, Ethan. I'm so scared of messing this up, of losing you before I've even really had you." "Then let's be scared together." Ethan pulled Adrian closer, until Adrian was sitting between his legs, back against his chest. He wrapped his arms around Adrian's waist, holding him securely. "No more hiding. No more pretending we're just friends who occasionally kiss. Let's be honest about what this is." Adrian's hands covered Ethan's, gripping tightly. "What is it then? What are we? We're two people who've been through hell and somehow found each other. We're healing. We're trying. We're choosing to be brave even when it's terrifying." Ethan pressed his lips to Adrian's temple. "And I think maybe, possibly, we're falling in love." Adrian twisted in his arms, meeting his eyes. "Ethan Hayes, are you asking me to be your boyfriend? Because that feels very high school." Ethan laughed, the sound surprising him with its lightness. "Fine, Adrian Winters. Will you enter into a mature, adult relationship with me, wherein we both acknowledge our baggage while working to build something healthy and honest together?" "That's terribly unromantic, you're right." Ethan grew serious, cradling Adrian's face in his hands. "How about this? You make me want to paint again. You make me want to see color and light and beauty. You make me believe that grief doesn't have to be the end of the story, that there's still life left to live. So yes, I'm asking you to be with me. Officially. Completely. Mess and all." Adrian's eyes were bright with emotion. "Yes," he breathed. "God, yes." His kiss was different from their first. It was deeper, more certain, carrying the weight of their confession. Adrian's hands tangled in Ethan's hair while Ethan pulled him closer. Needing to feel the solid reality of him, they kissed until they were both breathless. Until the fire had burned low and the room was dark, except for the moonlight streaming through the windows. "Stay," Ethan whispered against Adrian's lips. "Stay tonight. Just to sleep. I just want to hold you." Adrian nodded, and they made their way to the bedroom. Lying in bed together felt both natural and surreal. They faced each other in the darkness, close but not quite touching, both suddenly nervous now that they were here. "I haven't shared a bed with anyone since Daniel," Adrian said quietly. "I wasn't sure I'd want to again. We can go slow. Whatever you need." I need you to hold me. I need to know this is real." Ethan gathered Adrian into his arms, and Adrian settled against his chest with a sigh that sounded like coming home. His head fit perfectly under Ethan's chin. His body, slotting against Ethan's like puzzle pieces, finely aligned. "This is nice," Adrian murmured. "Already half asleep." "Yeah," Ethan agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of Adrian's head. "It really is." But as Adrian's breathing evened out in sleep, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Happiness warred with guilt in his chest. How could he be here, holding someone new when Marcus had only been gone 8 months? How could he feel this intense connection, this pull toward Adrian, when the love of his life was dead? "You deserve happiness." His therapist's voice echoed in his mind. The best way to honor Marcus is to live fully. His sister had told him. "Love isn't finite," his mother had said. "You can love Marcus and still make room for someone new." But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two different things. The guilt sat heavy on his chest, even as Adrian's warmth seeped into his bones. He must have eventually fallen asleep, because he woke to early morning light and the sound of the ocean. Adrian was still in his arms, awake now, watching him with those gray-green eyes. "Hi, Adrian," said softly.
By yourself.
"How long have you been awake?" "A while. I was watching you sleep." "That's not creepy, right?" Ethan laughed. "Maybe a little, but I'll allow it." They lay there, neither quite ready to face the day, to leave the cocoon of warmth and safety they'd created. "Tell me something true," Adrian said. "Something you haven't told anyone else." Ethan thought for a moment. "Sometimes I talk to Marcus. Out loud when I'm alone. I tell him about my day, about what I'm painting. I ask him questions I know he can't answer. I tell him I'm sorry for moving on, even though I know rationally that he'd want me to be happy." Adrian's hand found his, squeezing gently. "I don't think that's moving on. I think that's carrying him with you while still moving forward. There's a difference." "Your turn. Tell me something true." Adrian was quiet for so long that Ethan thought he might not answer. Then, "I haven't let myself be truly happy since Daniel. Every time something good happened, I'd find a way to sabotage it, or convince myself it couldn't last. I didn't think I deserved good things. But with you, I want to try. I want to believe I'm worthy of this." Ethan pulled him closer, overwhelmed by the trust Adrian was placing in him. "You are worthy. You're so worthy, Adrian." They kissed again, slow and deep, a promise being made without words. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "Breakfast?" Ethan suggested.
Please.
"I'm starving." They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Adrian would stay most nights, and they'd wake tangled together, make breakfast,
Ow.
then retreat to their respective creative work. Evenings were spent together, cooking, talking, walking the beach, learning each other's bodies with a gentleness that felt almost sacred. They didn't rush toward physical intimacy. Both carried too much history, too many scars from past relationships. Instead, they built slowly a foundation of trust and communication that made every touch, every kiss, feel earned. Ethan's art evolved. The solitary figure in his paintings became more defined, more present. He started a new series studies of hands. Adrian's hands holding a pen, cradling a coffee cup, reaching for him across a table. Each painting was an act of devotion, a way of saying, "I see you," without words. Adrian finished his novel. The ending he'd struggled with for so long suddenly became clear. His protagonist chose love, chose vulnerability, chose the risk of pain over the safety of isolation. It was the ending Adrian hadn't been able to imagine for himself until Ethan. "Will you read it?" Adrian asked one evening, handing Ethan the manuscript. "The whole thing. I want to know what you think." Ethan understood the weight of the request. This was Adrian's heart on paper. 3 years of work and pain and hope. "I'd be honored," he said. He read it over 3 days, completely absorbed. Adrian's writing was beautiful, lyrical, without being purple, emotionally honest without being melodramatic. The story of a man learning to love again after betrayal, resonated deeply, and Ethan found himself crying at several points. When he finished, he found Adrian pacing nervously in the cottage. "It's extraordinary," Ethan said simply. "Adrian, this is going to touch so many people." Adrian's face crumpled with relief. "Really? Really? You have to send this to publishers. This deserves to be in the world." They celebrated that night with wine and takeout from the town's only restaurant. They laughed and talked and kissed. And everything felt right in a way that Ethan had thought he'd never experience again. But as the evening wore on, Ethan felt a familiar anxiety building. His cottage lease ended in 3 weeks. He hadn't told Adrian yet. Hadn't figured out what he was going to do. "What's wrong?" Adrian asked, noticing his silence. "You've gone somewhere else in your head." Ethan took a deep breath. "My lease is up soon. 3 weeks. I need to decide if I'm staying or going back to the city." Adrian went very still. "Oh, I was thinking." Ethan's heart was pounding. "What if I didn't go back? What if I stayed here? I could find a permanent place, set up a proper studio. I paint better here. I'm happier here. I'm with you here." He didn't say, but the words hung between them anyway. "You'd stay?" Adrian's voice was careful, controlled. "For how long?" "As long as you'll have me." Adrian stood abruptly, walking to the window. His shoulders were tense, his breathing uneven. "Adrian?" Ethan approached carefully. "Talk to me." "I want you to stay," Adrian said, his voice rough. "God, I want that so much. But I need to know you're staying for you, not just for me. I need to know that if I somehow mess this up, won't regret throwing away your life in the city." Ethan understood. This was Adrian's fear speaking, the part of him that still believed he wasn't worth staying for. "Come here," Ethan said gently. Adrian turned, and Ethan pulled him close. "I'm staying because I want to be here. Because I'm ready to start over, to build a new life. Yes, you're a huge part of that decision. But even if you weren't in the picture, I think I'd still choose this place. It's healed me in ways I didn't know I needed." He tipped Adrian's chin up, meeting his eyes. "But you're right that I'm staying for you too. I'm staying because I love you, Adrian Winters. Because I want to see where this goes. Because I choose you." Adrian's breath caught. "You love me?" "I love you, completely. Messy baggage and all." "I love you too," Adrian whispered. "I'm still scared, but I love you." They held each other as night fell outside. Two hearts that had been broken learning to beat in sync again. Ethan signed a year-long lease. On a small house with a converted garage studio overlooking the ocean. The decision felt monumental and simple, all at once a declaration that he was ready to build something new. To plant roots in this soil and see what grew. Adrian helped him move in, which mostly involved transporting Ethan's art supplies and the few personal belongings he'd brought from the city. They worked in comfortable silence, punctuated by occasional kisses and laughter when they disagreed about where things should go. "The easel needs better light," Adrian insisted, trying to drag it toward the north-facing windows. "The artist gets to decide where the easel goes," Ethan countered, steering it back toward his original spot. They compromised, as they'd learned to do about most things that evening. Sitting on the floor of the empty living room, surrounded by boxes, Adrian pulled out a bottle of wine. "A housewarming gift," he said, producing 2 mugs since the glasses were packed. "And I have something else for you." He handed Ethan a leather-bound journal, its cover worn soft with age. "It was my grandfather's," Adrian explained. "He was an artist to watercolors mostly. He always said that creativity required documenting not just what you see, but what you feel. I thought maybe you could use it. Start fresh." Ethan ran his fingers over the cover, touched beyond words. "Adrian, I can't take your grandfather's journal." "Yes, you can. He died 5 years ago, and I've been waiting to find the right person to give it to. Someone who would understand what it meant to him. What art meant to him." Adrian smiled softly. "That's you, Ethan. You're the right person." Ethan pulled him into a kiss that tasted of wine and promise. "Thank you. For this, for everything. Thank you for staying." They made love that night for the first time. It happened naturally, a culmination of weeks of building trust and intimacy. There was nervousness. Adrian especially was shaky as they undressed each other slowly, carefully, like they were unwrapping something precious. "We can stop any time," Ethan reminded him, pausing with his hand on Adrian's belt. "I don't want to stop. I want you. I'm just—" Adrian laughed shakily. "I'm terrified I'll do something wrong. There's no wrong here. Just us. Just this." Ethan kissed him slowly. "Tell me what you need. I need you to go slow. I need you to keep talking to me. I need to know you're here, present, that this is real." "I'm here," Ethan promised. "I'm not going anywhere." They explored each other with reverent touches, mapping bodies, and learning what made the other gasp, arch, moan. It was tender and intense, vulnerable in ways neither had been with anyone in a long time. When they finally joined together, both were trembling, overwhelmed by the intimacy of it. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the makeshift bed Ethan had set up in the bedroom, both breathless and overwhelmed. "Okay?" Ethan asked, stroking Adrian's sweat-dampened hair. "More than okay." Adrian pressed his face against Ethan's chest. "That was—" "God, Ethan, I didn't know it could be like that." "Like what?" "Safe, loving, real." Adrian looked up at him, eyes bright. "With Daniel, sex was always performative somehow. Like I was supposed to be someone I wasn't. But with you, I can just be me. All of me." Ethan's heart ached with love for this man, broken and healing, scared and brave all at once. "You'd never have to be anyone but yourself with me." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in months, neither had nightmares. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Ethan painted more prolifically than he had in years, and Adrian began querying his novel to agents. They built a life together, piece by piece, peace inside jokes, shared routines, familiarity that felt both new and ancient. But Ethan knew there was something he still needed to do. One morning, in early December, he awoke before Adrian and quietly slipped out of bed. He made coffee, bundled up against the cold, and walked out to the studio. From a box he'd never fully unpacked, he pulled out a framed photograph. Marcus smiled up at him, saxophone in hand, caught mid-laugh at some joke Ethan could no longer remember. It was Ethan's favorite picture of him, pure joy captured in a single moment. "Hey," Ethan said softly, setting the frame on his workbench. "I know I haven't talked to you much lately. I've been busy, happy actually, and I need to tell you about someone." He talked to the photograph for over an hour, telling Marcus about Adrian, about falling in love again, about the guilt and the joy and the confusion of it all. "I need to know it's okay," Ethan finally said, tears streaming down his face. "I need to know that loving someone new doesn't mean I loved you any less. Because I did love you, Marcus. I still love you. But I love him too, and I don't know how to hold both of those truths." The studio was silent except for the sound of waves and Ethan's quiet crying. Then he heard the door open. Adrian stood in the doorway, wrapped in one of Ethan's sweaters, his hair sleep-mussed. "I woke up and you were gone," Adrian said softly. "I got worried." He noticed the photograph, noticed Ethan's tears. "Oh, should I go?" No. Ethan held out his hand. "Please stay." Adrian crossed to him, taking his hand. He looked at the photograph of Marcus, really looked, studying the face of the man Ethan had loved before him. "He was beautiful," Adrian said. "I can see why you loved him. He would have liked you," Ethan replied. "You're both stubborn and creative and terrible at accepting compliments." Adrian managed a small smile. Then, to Ethan's surprise, he addressed the photograph directly. "I know this is weird, but thank you. For loving Ethan, for making him happy. I promise I'll take care of him. I promise I'll never take for granted what you lost." His voice wavered. "And I'm sorry. I'm sorry you didn't get more time." Ethan pulled Adrian against him, both of them crying now. It felt like a release, like something breaking open that had needed to break. "I think I've been waiting for permission," Ethan admitted. "Permission to move forward. Permission to be happy again." Like I needed Marcus to somehow tell me it was okay. And has he? Ethan thought about the past months, the way he'd found painting again, the way colors had returned to his world, the way loving Adrian had made him feel alive in ways he'd thought were lost forever. Yeah, he said. I think he has. Christmas approached, and with it came visitors. Ethan's sister Sarah drove up from San Francisco, eager to meet the man who had brought her brother back to life. Adrian's sister Claire flew in from Boston. Curious about the artist her brother couldn't stop talking about, the four of them had dinner at Ethan's house. And despite initial nervousness, the evening was a success. Sarah and Claire hit it off immediately, bonding over their shared experience of worrying about their respective brothers. "So you're the famous Adrian," Sarah said, studying him openly. "My brother says you make him happy." "I try," Adrian replied, glancing at Ethan. "He makes it pretty easy." "Good, because if you hurt him, I know where you live." "Sarah," Ethan protested. "What?" "I'm just establishing expectations," Claire laughed. "Don't worry, I gave Ethan the same speech earlier. Adrian's been hurt enough. If there's any hurting happening, I'll be the one doing it." "No one is hurting anyone," Ethan said firmly. "Can we please have a nice dinner without threats of violence?" But he was grinning, and so was Adrian. Having their families meet felt significant. Felt like they were building something with a foundation strong enough to last after dinner. While Sarah and Claire were in the kitchen arguing about dessert, Adrian pulled Ethan out onto the deck. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small wrapped package from his pocket. "I know we said no gifts, but I couldn't help myself." Ethan opened it to find a key. "It's to my apartment," Adrian explained, suddenly nervous. "I know you have your own place now, and I'm not asking you to give it up. But I want you to have access to my space, to feel like you have a home there too, if you want. No pressure." Ethan looked at the key, then at Adrian's anxious face, and felt love swell in his chest so forcefully it almost hurt. "I want," he said simply, pulling Adrian into a kiss. "God, Adrian, I want everything with you. Everything. Everything. A life together. Future. All of it." Adrian's smile was radiant. "Well then, Merry Christmas." "We're Jewish," Ethan pointed out. "Fine. Happy Hanukkah. Happy whatever we're celebrating. Just happy." They kissed again as the first snow of the season began to fall. Rare and magical in this coastal town. Inside, Sarah and Claire watched through the window. "They're going to be okay," Claire said softly. "Yeah," Sarah agreed. "I think they really are." New Year's Eve found them back at the cove, bundled against the cold, watching the stars emerge as darkness fell. "I've been thinking," Adrian said, his breath misting in the frigid air, "about resolutions, about what I want from this new year. And I want to be brave, really brave. Not just in loving you, but in believing I deserve to be loved. I want to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop, for everything to fall apart. I want to trust this." Ethan squeezed his hand. "That's a good resolution. What about you? What do you want?" Ethan considered. A year ago, he'd wanted nothing but an end to pain. 6 months ago, he'd wanted simply to survive each day. Now, standing here with Adrian, he wanted so much more. "I want to honor Marcus by living fully. I want to create art that matters. I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like, however it evolves. I want to choose hope over fear." He turned to Adrian. "And I want to tell you every day that I love you until you believe it in your bones." Adrian's eyes shimmered with tears. "I'm getting there. Every day with you, I believe it a little more." They kissed as midnight approached. Two souls who had found each other in loneliness and were learning, slowly but surely, what it meant to heal together. "Thank you, Ethan," whispered against Adrian's lips. "For what? For being patient with me? For loving me, even when I was too broken to love myself properly? For showing me that grief and joy can coexist, that loving you doesn't mean betraying Marcus."
"Thank you for seeing me,"
Adrian replied. "For making me believe I'm worth staying for. For choosing me every day." As fireworks lit up the distant sky, the town celebrating in the harbor, they stood wrapped in each other's arms. Watching the colors reflect off the water, "We're going to make it," Adrian said, and it sounded like a promise. "Yeah," Ethan agreed, pulling him closer. "We really are." 6 months later, Ethan's first gallery show in over a year opened in Portland. The series was titled after the storm, and every painting featured water, light, and a figure that was part memory, part present. Part hope. Adrian stood beside him at the opening, watching people react to Ethan's work with awe and emotion. "I'm so proud of you," Adrian whispered. "Right back at you," Ethan replied. Adrian's novel had been picked up by a major publisher and was scheduled for release in the fall. "We did it. We actually did it." "We did," Adrian agreed. Lacing their fingers together that night, back in their home, they'd officially moved in together. In March, they lay in bed talking about the future. "I want us to get married," Ethan said suddenly. "Not right away, but someday. I want to stand up in front of everyone we love and promise you forever." Adrian went very still. "Then ask me." "What?" "Ask me, properly."
What?
Ethan sat up, looking down at Adrian's face in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Adrian Winters, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You've given me color and light and hope. You've helped me heal while healing yourself. You make me want to be brave and honest and better. So yes, someday when we're both ready, will you marry me?" Adrian's smile was brighter than the moon. "Yes, absolutely yes." They made love slowly, reverently. Two people who had been lost and found each other, choosing to build something lasting from the rubble of their pasts. Later, as Adrian slept peacefully beside him, Ethan looked at the leather journal Adrian had given him, now filled with sketches and thoughts and plans. On the last page, he'd written a quote from Mary Oliver that felt appropriate. "Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this, too, was a gift." Below it, he added his own words, "And someone I love now gave me light again." Both were gifts. Both were necessary. Both led me here. He set the journal aside and pulled Adrian closer. Breathing in the scent of hymn-salt air and coffee and home, outside, the ocean continued its eternal rhythm. And two hearts beat in sync, no longer alone, no longer afraid, choosing love over fear, again and again and again.